Alright, so I've been wanting to do this video for some time now, but I've been reluctant to approach it because it's a very sensitive topic, which has historical roots, which all parties in North America can identify with on one side or the other. What we first need to understand is that there's a spectrum of slavery. There's slavery, and then there's really minor, subtle forms of exploitation, and maybe somewhere in the middle is extortion. And by exploitation, the word has a negative connotation, but really, exploiting somebody is people make profit when other people do labor under them. I mean, the factory owner makes money off the factory workers. This is an engagement that many people would argue that people agree on. It's a contract that people agree on. You agree to go to employer, like a person who is born in these Chinese factory cities where they all dress the same, and I think the biggest one is like 30,000 people. It's like a city basically, and everything they need is in there, and they basically stay in there the better part of their life. They don't leave that property for the better part of their life. And a lot of people would say, well, this is agreed upon thing. They entered into that contract. They can leave at any time. But what tends to happen is a form of indentured servitude, by which they get locked into debts. And then in order to pay off those debts, they need to continue in that line of employment. Or maybe they sign a contract that they have to put in so many years working here or whatever. So there's a spectrum of slavery. That's kind of maybe a little bit more over here, closer to real slavery. Then on the other side of the spectrum, the softer side, where it really is in many ways an agreed upon a contract that you enter. You go in, you apply for a job at Subway, they make a little bit of money off of your labor, and you make some money, so you're happy. Essentially, it's not slavery, but it still is a form of exploitation. So really, any form of employment. So maybe the spectrum should be employment, slavery over here. There's very extreme forms of exploitation where you take absolutely all of the surplus value, giving the worker absolutely nothing but the bare minimum. And what they found, of course, is that, when slavery was happening in Brazil, in the Americas, is that it was more profitable to treat your slaves well because they would stay healthy and they would work and live longer and they would be more productive than if you just, mistreated them all the time and, really just burned them out. So you're definitely going to have hierarchies that emerge. You're going to have people with certain skill sets. Initially, the people who are going to rise to the top and take control are the people who are going to have some sort of military background. The people who can provide security are the people who are going to be listened to. You're not going to listen to a politician who's frail and weak and has never fired a gun in their life when you're worried about marauders coming down the street. Now, those security personnel, so long as it doesn't turn into some sort of military dictatorship, are going to eventually get to a point where perhaps there can be some civilization emerge once again, and you could have some sort of democratic process where the people calling the shots weren't just the brutes with the guns, but they were the people who were the nerds, the people who knew how to build things, the people who had an awareness of how a society should run, and how law can be imposed in such a way which people are going to accept and not want to rebel against and not constantly be on edge. Because remember, if you're too hard on your population, you become tyrannical, and either you're going to get a resistance or you're just going to burn your people out. I'm not saying here that just because you have a military background that you're not also capable of leadership. I'm just saying that the control to brains ratio is going to be much different when the shit hits the fan and there's no rule of law, because you may have a bunch of lower level military personnel types who, have not the highest IQs, we'll say, running around policing everybody, but they're not necessarily the ones who are the most capable of running that society. Now, on the other hand, you can also have, the higher ranking military officials who are very strategic in their thinking, and I would probably venture to say that the higher the rank, the more suitable you are perhaps to fill a position of office. Now, will we see slavery along ethnic lines? I think you might see, in some places, you might see some indenturement. It's never going to be the same as it was, for a variety of reasons. Number one, culturally, we're just different. And geographically, it's not the same. When slaves were caught in Africa by the slave catchers, who were Africans and sold into slavery to the Spanish and the English and Portuguese, they were taken out of their natural environment. They were taken out of everything they knew. Most of them spoke different languages, so that's one thing right there, is everybody in the United States mostly speaks English or Spanish. They have that common language, and it wasn't a common language which they inherited, like a lot of the slaves did, after they were already inculcated into the way of life. So if you were born into slavery and that's all you ever knew, then you would probably be less likely to resist, unless, your slave master was doing things that were a little over the top. And that's what happened with Nat Turner, and that's why, that's what led to the Nat Turner rebellion. So you have the common language, but most importantly, you have a culture which knows freedom. It knows freedom. It knows English. It knows all of the history after slavery. There's a lot of indignant, righteous people on all sides that just simply wouldn't accept slavery as it once was practiced, at least not from the get-go. It would take a long time, I think, before it was able to get to that. It would almost take probably a couple generations for it to go back to an ethnic-based form of slavery. Now, you may get forms of exploitation which maybe come to look like indenturement, where race is never really mentioned necessarily, or it's not the motive, it's not the impetus. Race isn't the drive that's causing the social arrangement to be a certain way. But you may have a lot of people who are, grew up in an urban environment. They don't have really any survival social skills, and they're forced to be refugees, go out into the country where they have absolutely no skills, and they meet some farmer who says, okay, if you do some work for me, I'll provide you with a place to stay and such and such and such and such. And then it takes on that form of arrangement where he might start skimming something off the top. And then it starts to take an exploitive form. But still, then it would still be kind of an employment. It would still be a contract, because the person would be free to leave. But at the same time, what is it out there that awaits them? And so that could be something which is held over their heads. Like, why do you stay here and work for us for basically nothing? Or you can hit the road and try to survive on the road by yourself out there in the lawless world that there is. If these people who are refugees from the cities, which if the grid went down, people would be evacuating the cities because there's nothing in the city. There's no food in the city. Eventually you have to leave the city. You have to. Because it's just brick and mortar, and it's the asphalt matrix that without the lifeblood of electricity moving all the product in and out, it's a dead zone basically, and there's nothing to eat. So people would be moving out of the city, and those people migrating would have to go into the surrounding areas. They'd be at the mercy, or they would attempt to overthrow the people in the rural areas, so you get clashes there. But I think you would have, as much as you would have the clashes, you would also have people who just needed help, and perhaps they were offered help by people who were very well meaning at the start. And this division of labor may come to be separated by ethnic lines. Now, you may have the case where you have black farmers and you have white refugees from the city who don't know anything, and they, go onto the black person's land, and that turns into a indenturement relationship. There really is three possibilities. The refugees leave the city, and they try to overthrow the farmers, and they either die or they don't. The refugees leave the city, and they beg the farmers for help. Farmers take them on, and they say, okay, you can live here, but you have to work for us. And the third one is the democratic one, where the farmers say, okay, come on our land, we have to band together. But how many people are going to be willing to just give people free reign? People that they don't necessarily know, unless it's a very incremental process where they're slowly taking on new people, and they're slowly getting to know new people, and they're vetting people, like they're turning away the people who are bad news. And you might have some stable pockets of activity. So it's likely going to be the three scenarios. You're going to have war, you're going to have exploitation, or you're going to have democracy. It's hard to say which one of those is really going to be predominant, because a lot of people are going to be quick to think, oh, it's just going to be war. But not necessarily, because nobody really wants that when you think about it. I mean, that's all. It's easy to talk tough until someone comes on your property and your kids are there, and these people are just asking for food or something, and maybe there's kids with them. Not many people, even the hardest tactical badasses, are going to just be able to start putting people down for no reason. There's going to come a point where a lot of people who are never in the preparedness mindset, preppers might do that. Some of the diehard John Wayne types might take that strict boundary line and say nobody ever. But there's going to be a lot of people who see the value of community, and those are really the ones who are going to be the most powerful in the end. And that's the thing a lot of you preppers have to remember, is that the lone wolf is the master of only his own domain. The people who are going to bring society back together and start building communities and start going to battle with regional battles where it's tribe versus tribe type thing, who rises to the top to run the nation after all that isn't going to be the lone wolf prepper who's saying get off my property. Eventually you're going to come up against a force which has been created in your absence while you've been fending off all the smaller marauder groups. There's going to be a power growing somewhere in these communities, because they're going to keep bringing in people. They're going to see the value of human resources, because it's human resources that build society, that give you an army. And you're going to come up on one of these armies one of these days, and they're just going to say, we want half your shit, like Negan said, right? So they're going to come up on you with an army you can't possibly take on. Maybe you'll take out a few of them, but eventually you're going to have to give up, and they're going to want half your stuff. They're going to extort you, and that's when you will get into a form of slavery. So you have extortion, where with Negan, he allowed people to freely exist a little bit. He gave them some freedom, but he said, you have to pay up. And basically that extortion kept them at a level where he was able to control them. They couldn't achieve a certain level where they were technologically sophisticated enough to resist him. And of course, he used a lot of things to keep the people fearful, which will likely be the case in some way, shape, or form. But it will come in the form of, like I said before, you better not leave here because the boogeymen are going to get you. What was that one show where there's this community of people? What was it called again? And The Village or something like that. It says Village of People, and they always tell the kids, don't go beyond the woods, because that's where all the monsters or the demons are or whatever. And every once in a while, there's this conspiracy of townsfolk who are trying to preserve the integrity of their community. They get on all these costumes, and they'll sound the alarm bell in the middle of the night and say, oh, the monsters, the demons are coming, and they get in these costumes, and everybody's scared crapless, right? People were indoctrinated into this, so they actually think these are real demons who come out, and you can't go past this certain perimeter fence, or else you'll be killed by these people. And what exists past this perimeter fence is this big forest, and it's the highway. It's civilization. So they use the threat of something outside that, oh, this is going to be really bad out there. If you go out there, you're not going to be able to survive. These things are going to get you. So you better stay in here and do what we say. That's a form of slavery too. It's just not a cracking the whip. It's not just, you get out there and work. It's still getting people to do what you want. And so that's why the exploitation slavery continuum is so important to understanding how things might take shape, because you're going to have very minor forms of it that are going to cause a lot of political issues, especially in the beginning when people are getting sorted out, when the power structure is getting sorted out. Somebody might not like being told what to do by somebody who has positioned themselves to be the alpha. And that's when you're going to get fights. You're going to have a situation where one alpha male doesn't like being told what to do by another alpha male, and you're going to have a fight, and that's going to determine, who gets the female, basically. It's just nature. It's just going to be two bulls locking horns to see who gets the cow. That's really what it's all about. So that's where you start to see hierarchy established, and you could argue that any hierarchy is in some cases exploitative. What is survival? Survival is just about staying alive. And last I checked, there's around 40 million African Americans in the United States who are still alive. So they survived that. You're always looking at the situation in the time period you're in, but you're forgetting about the big picture. You're forgetting about it's very easy to look at a picture perfect couple who you think has it all. There's two young, good-looking people who both have great jobs, great teeth, and they seemingly have nothing wrong with them. But, maybe they never have kids. And then what? That's it. Genetic dead end. Because they wanted to focus on their own ambition and their own goals and their own self-perfection seeking. And so that came at the expense of propagating their seed, which ultimately, that's what survival is all about. Survival isn't just about you surviving. Survival is about you passing the fire onwards. Like the guy says in the movie The Road, it's about carrying the fire. It's not just about you surviving in your bunker. If you are past the age of reproduction, it's about you teaching people what you know, what you've learned in life, passing that information on so that can be used by other people in the future to give the human race a better chance at surviving the cold, dark, frickin' universe that is out there. Yes, you may be at a disadvantage now. It doesn't mean your kids have to be. Doesn't mean their kids have to be. And, the tables always turn. In history, the tables always turn. Now, when you hear about slavery occurring around the world, there's more people enslaved now, that's what they commonly say, than there was back then. Part of that is due to the fact that there's now 7.5 billion people compared to the 1 billion people there was forever. Another part of that, of course, is that those forms of slavery are not necessarily crack the whip type slavery. They're more subtle forms of slavery, or they're forms of slavery by which a person may have no choice, but they're not, beaten within an inch of their life if they don't fully comply with everything that happens. I'm sure the threat of punishment is there, but a lot of those people didn't grow up in societies where they knew freedom beforehand, so they don't resist it because they never got a taste of what we have. Anyways, I could go on talking about this for hours because it's really going to be interesting to see how the power structure, the hierarchy, the systems of exploitation, how that all takes shape post-collapse. But I'm interested to hear your thoughts. And not just making comments, make some response videos to this stuff. Let's talk about this stuff. Because this one was kind of an elephant in the room for the longest time. Because I think I've subtly touched on it, but it was touch and go all the time. I was going to make a whole After the Collapse series about this. But I figure I'd just come and do this free form. because I don't really have the time, to be honest, to take it to that level of production for a video that's only going to get 10,000 views because YouTube demonetizes it and doesn't promote it. It's just simply not worth the investment of my time, unfortunately, even though I want to do those things. Maybe if I could get it privately funded somehow in the future, I'll certainly look into doing that, because I'd like to take a deeper dive into this topic. Let me know what you guys think, though. Make a response video. If you do a response video, send me a message by canadianprepper@hotmail.com so I know that it's out there. You don't just want to make a video and assume I know it's out there and then get mad at me because I haven't watched the video. 2-3 weeks has gone by. Send me a message and I'll check it out. I'm interested in hearing your perspective, because there's always something I miss, and there's a lot to this particular topic. So let's have a little discussion. Thanks for watching. Canadian Prepper out. The best way to support this YouTube channel is to support yourself by gearing up through canadianpreparedness.com or bugoutroll.ca. Premium quality gear at the best possible price using the incredibly secure and easy to use Shopify platform. We offer free shipping to the United States for orders over $200 USD and free shipping to Canada over $75. So support the channel by supporting yourself.